السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت، الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Who you believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Amma ba'd, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says toward the end of Surah Al-A'raf, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ. We have destined, we have created to hellfire many of the jinn and the humankind. And this is been destined to hellfire, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها ولهم أعين لا يبصرون بها ولهم آذان لا يسمعون بها. They do have hearts with which they do not comprehend, and ears with which they cannot listen or to hear, and they have eyes with which they cannot see. أولئك كالأنعام they are like the cattle, like the livestock. بل هم أضل, indeed more stray. أولئك هم الغافلون, those are the heedless. And this ayah, a truly scary ayah, because reading it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already created such big number of jinn and human being to be in the hellfire. But it will be, inshallah, easy for us, or will be able to understand the profound meaning of the ayah if we try to read it or reflect on the end of the ayah to help us understand the beginning of the ayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ, those are the ghafilun, those are the heedless one. So the heedless one, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, these are the people who degrade themselves to be in the level of the cattle. And here, subhanallah, when you think about it, it's not the Quran to come to insult people. So this is not type of insult. I mean, be degraded to the level of the cattle is a situation that Allah is describing, is a state of the people, of these people who have degraded themselves to be at the level of the cattle. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us description of their state. So they are heedless because they had degraded themselves to the level of the cattle. But if the heedlessness came from being degraded or to deliberately degrading themselves to be at the level of the animals, no. The heedlessness comes from the fact to not take advantage of the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He bestow upon the humankind, who make them to be distinguished from the cattle and to be elevated, high elevated than the cattle, which is the mind, which is the heart, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for us to comprehend, to understand, to reason. And the reasoning in the Quran comes with the heart, because the heart is the core entity, subhanAllah, the whole way or the whole or the core of the understanding, of feeling, of emotion. And then the core, when we're talking about the heart, is incorporate the mind that is known in the secular world that only to talk about the mind, and they exclude fully the heart. But the center element as a gift in the human being, according to the creation of Allah and to the divine guidance, is the heart. People neglecting and not taking advantage of this favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow upon them, to be diverted or to, subhanAllah, make it to be crippled into a sense that is not used for its perspective, for its purpose, that's when someone becomes heedless. And heedlessness here make them to be at the level of the cattle. Why at the level of the cattle? Because they're degrading themselves, because they live in the same way as the cattle they do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the cattle to live according to their inner nature that He created in them. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Taha, when Fir'aun asked Musa alayhi salam, who is your Lord? قَالَ رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى, the one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, our Lord, He is the one who provided for everything its creation, then it gave it its guidance. So all the cattle, they have their guidance, the way that they live, and the way their purpose of life within their inner nature. So if a person will, subhanAllah, neglect and disregard the gift of the heart, the gift of the reasoning, the gift of the mind, he becomes like at the level of the cattle. Why? Because at this sense, he would not be able to understand the big picture of the universe, nor the big picture of his own purpose of life. Why? Because as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلَ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً. The example of the people who do not believe, of the ungrateful, and this is very important, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said they are the heedless one, those who degrade themselves to be at the level of the, or to live like the cattle, more astray. Why more astray? Because the cattle, they are living according to the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for them. But the people are neglecting such a great favor to elevate them among and to be preferred among, all these creation, but they are compelling themselves with their willingly, with their own choice, to live at that level. So they made by this choice to, subhanallah, to make part of their gifts or their element, their aspect that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them to find success, to find that, great blessed life, which is to make their heart to not comprehend. It's like they put seal on their heart and seal on their hearing and their eyes. And this is the ghafla. So Allah had said in Surah Al-Baqarah, in the ayah that I have mentioned, their example is like the example of shouting at those who do not hear nothing except calls and cries. So imagine someone when he's shouting at an animal, they only hear the cries and the calls. And these calls is like, for them, is like a sound. It's a sound they do not comprehend. But it just, subhanAllah, attract of like attention. So here, the disbeliever or the ungrateful, because we cannot say that the disbeliever are the only people who are in this state, because you find, the heedlessness, it's subhanAllah, it will be inflicted on every heart, a disbeliever or a believer. And the believer who's like also who prays and fasts and pay the zakat, he might be also from these heedless people. Why? Because there is no life in their salat, or there is no life in their fasting. Therefore, they live exactly like the cattle. So here, why we say cattle? And again, this is not an insult. This is a state of a person, how he deliberately make themselves to be in this situation. So when we say, their example is the example of the shouting at those who do not hear nothing except cries and sounds and calls. So here, what the cries and the calls that the human being, when they are, subhanAllah, neglecting and not taking benefit and the advantage of the favor of the heart and the reasoning, it's, subhanAllah, only the call that they can hear is the call to satisfy their appetite of their own instinct. It becomes, subhanAllah, seeking, to quench their desire, the appetite of their desire from this worldly gain. So the call that they hear is the call that called them to the food, called them to entertainment, call, subhanAllah, to just satisfy what is inside. And exactly like the cattle. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال, وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يَتَمَتَّعُونَ وَيَأْكُلُونَ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ الْأَنْعَامِ. The ungrateful ones are entertaining themselves and they eating like the cattle do. But when they gotta go, وَالْعِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ, to the hellfire. Therefore, a believer, a Muslim, can already be in this situation of heedlessness. Therefore, he deliberately cast on his own heart seal, so he will not be able to comprehend and to be in a way in interaction of the divine guidance to help them be responsible and aware of their path and how to get to the success that everyone is looking for to achieve. So you see, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the end of this ayah that I have mentioned, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً قَالَ صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. SubhanAllah, they are deaf, dumb, blind, therefore they do not comprehend, do not understand. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this gift of the mind and the heart to comprehend. As we said, the heart is what helps the believer to comprehend. Is in the Quran, أَفَلَمْ يَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Should not they travel in the earth and have hearts with which they comprehend and ears with which they can hear to see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the heart is comprehend. And he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قَالَ إِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ. It's not the eye that they go blind, it's the heart in the chest, in the breast which goes blind. So here when you think about it, it's very important for us as a believer to understand this gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the heart, of the ability, of the reasoning, of this ability and subhanAllah the faculties that we have of cognition, to use it in what is going to help you. Because if we are heedless from the right perspective of this gift, then we are deliberately making ourselves to be among the heedless. And if you are among the heedless, what is going to happen? You're going to lose that sense of reasoning. You're going to lose that sense of understanding. You're going to lose that sense of comprehending the light of the guidance. Therefore, what is going to happen? To be joining those who are being distant and created for the hellfire. Wal-'iyadhu billah. So you see, from the end of the ayah will help us also to be reminded and admonished that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about the jinn and the ins, the worst of this world, to go to the hellfire. No, we might be among them. Why? Are we disbelievers? No, the fact because we are heedless, and heedlessness make a person to be diverted from the remembrance of Allah, diverted from their right purpose. So all they live their life like everybody else, their dreams like everybody else. The whole, subhanAllah, the appearance, they have a Muslim appearance into their, a'yad, festivities, celebration, their gathering. But inside, subhanAllah, they look like everybody else who are fully diverted from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a believer, therefore, we need to be serious about this if we truly seeking the pleasure of Allah and seeking to success for ourselves. Two questions are very important. When we say, subhanAllah, heedlessness, we are heedless of what? This is very important to give us the idea of the magnitude of the heedlessness that we're talking about. The second is the brain or the mind and the heart that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow upon you as a gift. And you adhere it and you embrace it as a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not like the people who do not believe. It's like it's a given something. It's like their mind that they are who they are. No. Because such a people, they're being too proud and arrogant by the fact to not be aware of their purpose of life. Then the second question will be, why this mind? Why this heart that has been given? So the first question to answer it, to see the magnitude of the thing that we are heedless of. The first thing, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that inflict or subhanAllah is inscribed on every one of us depends on what we do. So people, they see them enduring calamities and going through difficulties, and they're always complaining and trying to find a way out, while they are fully heedless that what they have earned is because of what they have done. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا ظَلَمْنَاهُمْ وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا هُمُ الظَّالِمِينَ. We have not transgressed them, but they transgressed themselves. وَمَا ظَلَمَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never have transgressed them, but they have been transgressing themselves. Therefore, when someone is heedless of the big picture, they are, subhanAllah, fighting situation of difficulty, not knowing that they were the source and the origin of all these difficulties. That's why the believers, when he's aware of the destiny and the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever and whenever he's hit by a calamity, he goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to check, is it because something I have done, Ya Allah, or maybe this is the way that you want to purify me. That's how find contentment and find his way as a believer and find her way. But the heedless one, he will be totally drowned in his heedlessness, fighting all, subhanAllah, and struggling into this calamity that he's facing without knowing why it's happening. And that is one of the aspects of heedlessness. Why? Because the heart has a seal in it, and deliberately they get themselves to that state. Another aspect of heedlessness is someone who is unaware of the path who give them the tranquility, and the path who help them to come to the success, a path where they're gonna be achieving their fulfillment. They're always trying everything. They're trying all the types of the wellness that the world outside is offering, but they never tried the wellness from the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the remembrance of Allah, where the only wellness, spiritual wellness, and all, subhanAllah, the type of wellness, if you put it into its comprehensive meaning, is only can be achieved when you are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a fact. The joy of the heart can only be, subhanAllah, achieved only when you are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to be heedless of such a thing, because the person who does not know such a thing, it's impossible for them to find the way of their peace. It's impossible for them to find their way of happiness. The pleasure that they gain from all this gain of the dunya is like a fleeting pleasure, and then subhanAllah is always turned into deception, always turned into depression, and when they suffer depression after that pleasure more than the moment of the pleasure that they have experienced or they have enjoyed. And this is ghafla. So the believer, he should not be heedless of such a thing. One of the other elements, which is, subhanAllah, one of the biggest ghafla that the people they have, toward the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree, is the plot of Allah, the planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا. They planned their plan. They plotted their plot. وَمَكَرُوا مَكْرًا وَمَكَرْنَا مَكْرًا. We also have planned while they do not perceive it. Then look at the outcome of their planning, how all they have been destroyed, with all their people. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about Thamud and his people. قَالَ فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ مَكْرِهِمْ أَنَّ دَمَّرْنَاهُمْ وَقَوْمَهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ فَتِلْكَ بُيُوتُهُمْ خَاوِيَةٌ بِمَا ظَلَمُوا. Look at their homes empty. destroyed. Why? Because of their transgression. They have planned and they have, subhanAllah, trying to prevail, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not heedless of what they do. They were heedless. And this is how the believers, subhanAllah, when you are heedless of such a thing, then you're going to be going through difficulties in your life, and subhanAllah, to be unaware of what is the origin of this problem, that it is really to classify then yourself from among the heedless, where in the beginning of the ayat they've been destined of the hellfire. So look, if you are heedless of such a thing, it's a threat for all of us that we might be on the verge of falling into the hellfire. And on the verge that we become someone bukmun umyun, subhanAllah, deaf, dumb and blind. And that's what the believer will always struggle to not have or to not be inflicted with. And if you've been inflicted with such a thing, it was your proper choice. What choice? Because you've been heedless of such a thing. And then look, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told this example. Because when someone, he's trying things to prevail, he's trying things to have their upper hand, to dominate, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates and dislikes injustice and oppression. The ungrateful, they spend their money, they spend their wealth to avert يَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will spend it. Look, subhanAllah, they plotting and they are heedless because they think they have control over all things. Now they spending their money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish them first by the regret of spending such a thing because they could not get what they want. Second, قَالَ سَيُغْلَبُونَ, and they're going to be overcome and they're going to be defeated. Third, they're going to be all gathered in hellfire. وَإِلَى جَهَنَّمَ يُحْشَرُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us another example. When someone is totally heedless, it's like, subhanAllah, running toward their perdition, running toward their destruction. Like in the nature of the human being, had it not been the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the dua that you'll be making is the dua to bring for yourself distraction. قَالَ وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ. We're always making dua, but we don't know that dua is like bringing us sharr, bringing us harm. And why? Because the nature of the human being is hasty. Had it not been the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us what to make the dua, who take us to the shore of safety and peace and the fulfillment, will be all utterly in loss. Then one of the great examples that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran, someone fully heedless, ungrateful, kafir, Fir'aun. Subhanallah, to protect his throne, he killed, all these children, all these newborn. Heedless. And he thinks he has control over everything. And subhanallah, the child who's going to destroy his throne, he's been taken care by himself in his own palace. فَالْتَقَطَهُ آلُ فِرْعَوْنَ. The people of Fir'aun, the family of Fir'aun, they picked Musa from the river to become for them an enemy and the source of grief. لِيَكُونَ لَهُمْ عَدُوًّا وَحَزَنًا. And this is, subhanAllah, what we are heedless of. So when the believer is heedless of such a thing, of the great plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the path of the divine guidance who helping you to find your fulfillment, or all of that, then we are from the side of the heedless. Don't tell me that you are a believer. Don't tell me that your salah is going to take you to paradise. How can a salah take you to paradise when you do not have any connection all during the years that you have been praying? And this is a fact. And this is a reality. It does not mean that we are bad. The Quran reminds us to really redeem ourselves and turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second question, the reasoning and the ability that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this favor that He gave you, of reasoning, of understanding, of comprehending, of analyzing, of distinguishing between things, on preventing yourself from getting into, things that will harm you. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called this faculty, this ability, in many names in the Quran, call them ulil albab, ulil nuha, inna fi dhalika laqasamu lidhi hijr. Al-hijr wa nuha, from nahi wa hajra, from preventing, protecting, forbidden. So it is the mind, is this the capacity of your reasoning to help you be protected, to help you take the right decision. So here, the favor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be used for what perspective? Is not to be used for the conquest of the outer space. Is not to be used for the domination of the nature around us. Simply to be used, and mostly for one thing first, to know who you are. You say, who I am. Allah give you a brain, give you a mind, give you a heart to know who you are. Not, subhanAllah, to use your all capacity that you have, of understanding, of all your skills that you have to make money, to make your dreams come. No, first did you ask yourself who you are? And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you your favor. This favor that He elevated you to be like above many of His creation. قَالَ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. Is first to know who you are. Then when you look deeply within yourself, you know that you are a weak person. This is how you're going to know your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, that إِنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. You're going to look at yourself and you find yourself in every aspect you are needy. You cannot do anything. SubhanAllah, look around us in our community, how many people they passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them. Many of them, they have, subhanAllah, they say they entered the home, just take a nap and he didn't wake up. We are weak. Someone, subhanAllah, suddenly he cannot, subhanAllah, walk. The other one, subhanAllah, you got diagnosed with a cancer, and we are weak. So when you think who you are, you find yourself that you are needy, that you are weak. How someone, subhanAllah, become arrogant when he knows such a thing? Knowing that you are weak, you're going to turn who is the greatest and the strongest is Allah. Therefore, too, you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in humility. Who is the one who's going to provide your needs is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you are al-faqir. And know, subhanAllah, knowing yourself is the first purpose of the mind and the heart that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you, through which you're going to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through which you're going to be humble, because being heedless on such reality, on such truth, then you're going to be an arrogant person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Behold, your Lord proclaimed, call me, I'll respond you. Then right after he said, those who are too proud to worship me, they're going to be cast in hellfire, subhanallah, humiliated. Now, if you just to try, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, call me, I'll answer you. And then he said, those who are arrogant to worship me. Who are arrogant to worship Allah? Are the disbeliever here? He said, no, those who do not make dua. If a person does not believe in Allah, how are you going to make dua? I said, look, try to analyze it. This person, he neglected the best gift he's been given to them is the heart. It's the ability of comprehending. By neglecting such a thing, he made himself to live in the same sphere as the cattle they do. And being unaware of his Lord, being unaware of his Creator, then he does not know, therefore, that he's needy. He does not know that he's weak. How are you going to be behaving? You're going to be behaving an arrogant person. That's how become someone arrogant to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because he didn't know who he is. He didn't know this person is weak. He does not recognize or acknowledge their weakness because they didn't use the mind and this inability to think that they are such a weak person. For this reason, the believers, when they put in action their reasoning, their understanding into the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they understand, subhanallah, and they acknowledge all this ability or this situation that we are in. We are weak people, so we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the soul of the servitude. When you know who you are, it helps you to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when you know Allah, and when you come to this situation, what you're going to find? You find the Quran waiting for you. The Quran waiting for you to give you the whole divine worldview, which is going to give you then that tranquility into your heart and going to give you the peace into your mind and help you to have that path toward the true fulfillment. It's the Quran that it has the whole reflection of the meaning of the whole universe and the reflection of who you are to tell you how to behave and how to do the right conduct. Therefore, look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. Allama al-Quran. He taught the Quran. Then he said, created humanity. Then he said, he taught him the eloquency of the speech. Can you imagine from a blood clot to turn into human being able to speak? And to speak in the way how you speak, and this eloquency that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us is actually what reflects our capability and ability to think and to reflect and to make the choices. Therefore, this bayan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us is the way how you implement, with which you're going to implement the guidance of the Quran. So when you think in the right perspective, the first great gift that you're going to see it waiting for you is the Quran, because Allah taught the Quran even before the creation of al-insan. And that's the big difference between someone heedless and between someone who's aware, who's someone who reflects, who's someone who has, subhanAllah, from ulil albab, who understand. And this understanding, what is going to help you? Going to help you to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. It's going to help you to find that humility, to the point that you're going to be appreciated to the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you to do what? To be thankful to Allah. And that's what Sulaiman alayhi salam said. قَالَ رَبِّ أَوْزِعْنِي, oh Allah, empower me, enable me, inspire me to be grateful to you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the follower of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, He said, till when they get their strength and reach 40 years, they will say, oh Allah, enable us. أَوْزِعْنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرْ, to be thankful to your gift, Ya Allah. So look, subhanAllah, the big difference between someone heedless, that not taking advantage of this favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, become ungrateful, become arrogant, become someone who's neglectful, and become someone, subhanallah, worthy of to be cursed and hellfire, because he puts seal on their heart and becomes among someone bukmun umyun fahum la yaqilun. And the believers who make themselves to be aware of such a thing by knowing themselves and using their brain and their mind and their heart to see the path, they find the Quran waiting for them to explain for them their purpose of life, to give them the path of the guidance, and then they turn to see, appreciate and hold that high esteem, all the gift of Allah, then turning in humility to Allah, begging Him, Rabbi awzi'ni an ashkura ni'matak. Oh Allah, enable me, inspire me, empower me to be grateful to your gift that you have bestowed upon me and you have bestowed upon my parents. And this is the big difference. Therefore, dear believer, and respected brother and respected sisters, let's not have ourselves, subhanallah, to be deluded, and let be, subhanallah, falling into heedlessness without perceiving it. We're going to end up, wal-iyadu billah, in hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said about the mothers of the believer, He said, if you commit an obscenity, you will have the double of the punishment. And that's not aziz ala Allah. This is not big for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He said to His Prophet, if you change one of our revelation, you're going to be cast on you the double of the punishment. Therefore, we are not special. We're not like our Muslim, you're going to be saved from hellfire. No, you are Muslim who need to struggle and strive to fight against heedlessness. That is going to help you to be really accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not your prayer, it's not your fasting, if you do them within this perspective of being aware, to be, subhanallah, awakened, to be like open eyes, to have the humility. And what is the sign of it? That you appreciate greatly the gift of Allah, and then you be begging Allah by the night and in the morning and in the evening, Ya Allah, help me to be, thankful to you. And the best way to do it is to invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His name. Why with His name? Because every time you introduce to yourself a new name, it's going to help you better to know Allah. And the more you know Allah, the more closer you get to Him, the more humility you have, and then the more, subhanallah, fulfillment you will be gaining, and that you will gain the sweetness of Iman that we were talking about last week. And look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what have he said exactly after the ayah that we have mentioned. We have created for Jahannam many of jinn and kins. وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا. And the end of the ayah, قَالَ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْغَافِلُونَ. Those are the heedless. What did he say, subhanahu wa ta'ala, right after this ayah? قَالَ وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. To Allah belongs all the beautiful name. Therefore invoke him with it. Exactly what has been saying. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروا الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he is merciful and kind and caring toward the believers. Once he said to Mu'adh radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Ya Mu'adh, wallahi inni uhibbuk. By Allah, Ya Mu'adh, I love you. And this is his way, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his perfect way, as he has been the best of all the creation by being the best of those who being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As a matter of fact, one of his name is Ahmed, and Ahmed is the most person who have, make hamd to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَهُوَ Ahmed. And being Ahmed, he deserved to be Muhammad, to be praised. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the hadith when he was reproached about his excessive striving in ibadah, he said, أَلَا أَكُونُ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a grateful servant? This is how he's teaching us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's teaching to his companion as teaching us by teaching his companion. قَالَ إِنِّي لَا أُحِبُّكَ. A token of caring, of love, of kindness, and also to show to the Mu'adh that what is going to come, he has to hold it at very high esteem, because he started uhibbuk, and then you open your heart. Can you imagine the Prophet ﷺ telling you, I love you? And then he said, Ya Mu'adh, Ya Mu'adh, do not let any prayer passes, but to say after it, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. This dua summarizes all what we have said. Oh Allah, help me to remember you. Ya Allah, help me to thank you. Ya Allah, help me to worship you in the best of the manner. Help me to remember you through His name, to be in deep connection and continual connection with Allah. Ya Allah, help me to thank you. Thanking you, Ya Allah, who's gonna bestow upon me all the blessings of increasing in the blessing that you have bestowed upon me, and the best of the blessing and the favor is the favor of the Iman. Therefore, increasing me in the blessing of the Iman to help me be firm and perseverant of the Deen. Qala wa husni ibadatik, and to worship you in the best manner, that's the path to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, this dua should help us to defend ourselves from the disease of heedlessness who might take us to hellfire. Should help us to be aware, should help us to bring into our heart the peace, should help us to bring to our heart that fulfillment, should help us to be great believers in the way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يجعلنا من عباده المتقين. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أجمعين. ربنا لا تجعلنا من الغافلين. ربنا أوزعنا أن نشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علينا وعلى والدينا، وأن نعمل صالحا ترضاه، وأصلح لنا في ذريتنا إنا تبنا إليك وإنا مسلمين. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا رب العالمين ارحم إخواننا في غزة. اللهم أنزل عليهم رحماتك، اللهم أنزل عليهم سكينتك، اللهم أفرغ عليهم صبرا وثبت أقدامهم وانصرهم على المعتدين الظالمين. اللهم دمر الظالمين وأعوانهم إنك على كل شيء قدير وبالإجابة جدير. نعم المولى ونعم النصير. وآخر دعوانا إن الحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقيموا الصلاة يرحمكم الله.